My name is Kamala Carmen. I am the parent organizing liaison for the consortium schools and the mother of two consortium school graduates. This is session 2 of a 4-part Zoom series we're calling Where Thinking Thrives. That is also the title of our latest report, which you can read or download from our website, performanceassessment.org, and we'll put that link in the chat for you. Today's session is a deeper dive into the consortium's performance-based assessment system, which is how students in consortium schools demonstrate they are ready for graduation. We'll be defining just what we mean by performance-based assessment throughout the evening. But first, I'll start by giving you a brief introduction to the consortium as a whole, and after that grounding, we'll be showing you a short film that follows one student as she goes through the steps of a performance-based assessment task, or PBAT for short. We'll follow the video with a panel discussion that features teachers and students from the video, and we'll end with opportunities for the panelists to answer your questions. So as questions come up for you, please type them in the chat, which my colleague, AJ Rathman-Noonan, will be monitoring. We will choose as many of your questions as we have time for. And one word for those of you who attended session 1 of this series, although the intro to the consortium I'm about to give you will sound very familiar, please don't stray far. It's only a few minutes, and we don't want you to miss the PBAT video upon which the rest of this session depends. So the consortium is actually shorthand for the New York Performance Standards Consortium. We are a network of public schools connected by shared core values and some common practices. Chief among these practices is a commitment to inquiry-based education. As opposed to the type of education most of us here probably experienced, and which is still the norm in many schools today, students in an inquiry-based classroom are not expected to passively absorb information from their teacher or a textbook. Instead, they actively explore, research, and investigate their way into solving problems or questions. They communicate the results of their inquiry through discussion and writing and engage in reflection and revision throughout. This kind of learning tends to go deep rather than broad, and so is ill-suited to assessment methods like standardized tests that are merely checking to see if a range of material was covered. For this reason, the consortium has developed an alternative way for our students to demonstrate or perform their learning, the PBAT, or performance-based assessment task. For over 25 years, the New York State Education Department has supported our school's use of PBATs by granting our students a waiver from most Regents exams. While most public high school students in New York State must take and pass 5 Regents exams in order to graduate, consortium students take only the English language arts Regents. When schools aren't driven by standardized tests, they are freed up to place the development of students' minds and ideas at the center of what they do. This is the engine that motors the consortium. In order to graduate, all students in our schools must complete PBATs in 4 subject areas: math, science or engineering, literature, and social studies. Some schools may add other subjects like foreign language. Each PBAT has a written component, typically an analytical paper or lab report. Students also do an oral defense where they answer questions on demand about their work. Students develop the questions that they will write about for each subject area PBAT in discussion with each other and their teacher. Then they undertake intensive research, reading, experimenting for science and engineering, writing, and revision to produce their papers. Throughout, students develop and express their own ideas. Once submitted, the PBAT paper is evaluated by the subject area teacher, who the student worked with, and an external evaluator. That is, the student's own teacher in that discipline is not the only one evaluating their work. If the teacher and evaluator agree that the paper is good enough, the student moves to the second stage of the PBAT, the oral defense. If the paper is judged not ready to be defended, the student must revise it further. During oral defense, the student presents on their paper topic and answers questions posed by the external evaluators. The classroom teacher who worked with the student can participate in the process, but only the two external evaluators determine the final grade. Students who do not pass the defense have the opportunity to revise and try again later. The PBAT process is the focus of tonight's webinar, so we'll dig in even more deeply in just a bit. I noted that the consortium is a network of schools. What's the purpose of that, and why does that matter? Being joined in a network provides support for the people working in our schools and keeps them accountable to our shared values and goals. Each of our schools is distinct. They're not centrally controlled. Instead, the network provides, as we like to say, top-down support for bottom-up innovation. This includes cross-network teacher exchanges and professional learning groups, shared development of the rubrics used to score the PBATs, you'll hear more about that in the panel discussion, and research about the effectiveness of our work. Here's a look at some consortium stats. The consortium is 38 schools, 36 of which are in New York City and 4 of the 5 boroughs. The other 2 are in Rochester and Ithaca. This group of schools is very diverse. 7 of our schools are transfer schools that serve students who typically have not had success in their previous schools. 5 are international schools, which serve newly arrived immigrant students. And 6 are 6 through 12 schools, which means they have middle school grades in addition to the high school grades that all other consortium schools have. The majority of our schools are unscreened. The graphs on the right compare consortium schools in green to other New York City schools in orange. As you can see, consortium schools as a group actually serve a higher needs student population than New York City public schools as a whole. This slide shows something remarkable. Our students are outperforming their peers when it comes to four-year graduation rates. The difference for students with disabilities, as you can see in that second to bottom bar graph on the left, is particularly noteworthy. And that good news continues beyond graduation. Consortium schools outperform the city and the country on college enrollment and persistence, meaning staying enrolled in college. I'll end this intro with this quote from researchers who analyzed data about consortium graduates who attended CUNY colleges or City University of New York. They concluded that the tendency of consortium students to outperform their demographically similar peers is especially pronounced for Black males, writing that, quote, they are noticeably more likely to persist in college and to receive higher grades. As I mentioned, tonight our focus is a deep dive on the consortium's performance-based assessments. To begin that exploration, we're going to show you a video filmed at one of our schools in the Bronx, Fannie Lou Hamer Freedom High School. At Fannie Lou, we shot footage in Aaron Bruto's history classroom and then returned to document one of his students, Keisha, deliver the oral defense portion of her PBAT. 1 year later, we filmed an epilogue with Keisha. Getting to see the students and teachers in action was very enlightening for me, as I hope it will be for you. So I'm going to ask while you watch to think about the following: how student voice and choice help shape the project, the role of the teacher, the connection between what happens in the class and the assessment, and any questions you might have about the process. Remember, if questions arise, just type them in the chat and we will refer them to the panelists as time allows. And one final note, tonight's video is of a social studies PBAT, but we also have videos of PBAT defenses for science, math, and literature on our website. You'll find a link in the chat if you'd like to watch those later. All right, I think we're ready to play the movie.
Some of the work that I've done in class. Have her tell you about her thesis? What other institutions are present in that moment?
Time it also pushes back, pushes away the kids who go.
You should write that down because that's a big idea. I'm not sure where it's going to go in your paper, if at all, but you want to get. At Fannie Lou, I really feel as if I am allowing the students to build something for themselves. It's making sure that the PBATs grow out of actual work that we've done in class. Students took my full semester course on the civil rights movement and write a short paper on that topic. And then we end the semester with just several weeks of working on the PBATs, and the kids choose which topic they want to expand so that they start with this very solid base. And it's a lot of carving out time to conference with kids, but also a lot of giving kids strategies to write independently.
They come up with an idea or they pick a topic first.
I wanted to do something on economics. I had a few ideas in mind. I gave the kids a few options. We voted. Black capitalism was one of those options. At the beginning, Keisha, like almost all the students, were really for the concept of black capitalism. They thought, okay, this is the answer. This is how we have to move forward. The paper really represents Keisha sorting through some of the questions that she's sort of trying to figure out how all of these pieces fit together. I think that struggle is why we want kids to do big writing projects, as opposed to just producing something perfect. It's the process that we really want.
I feel like I saw that in the paper. What does the English rubric say? A mind at work. When you take an exam, like a Regents exam, you're sort of learning these facts for a score. But when you read something that you had no idea about and you talk about it with other people and you come up with your own idea about it and you try to express that idea in writing and your peers read it and your teacher reads it, you recognize that you matter and that your voice matters, but you also understand what history is. You've engaged in the very real process of what historians do.
Hi, my name is Keisha.
Nice to meet you, Keisha.
Keisha's going to give a short, maybe 10-minute presentation of her paper and her ideas, and then we're just going to have a conversation.
President Nixon was actually the one that created the term Black capitalism. Black capitalism is the idea of Black people generating wealth through businesses, ownership, and just getting assets. So my thesis on Can Black Capitalism Work is the idea that Black capitalism cannot work because Black people don't have existing capital. One of the books that I found myself going really deep into it is called The Whiteness of Wealth by Dorothy A. Brown. So this book is basically goes over how the tax system impoverishes Black Americans and how we can fix it. At first, it was very difficult to kind of understand and read because the words or the language that she uses in particular are like languages that I've never seen in my life. Like I've never sit down and read a book about the taxation system. The GI Bill and FHA bill, they were not extended to Black Americans who pay taxes. Getting school fees, housing, books, all of these things, they weren't being extended to Black Americans. In the Real Roots of Capitalism, it says that using capitalism to fix the racial wealth gap will only work if there is a means to transfer capital, assets, wealth, or housing. And I do not think that Black capitalism is doing all of those four things that we need to do to fix the racial wealth gap.
Can you talk about why you chose your examples about the tax systems, Nixon's opportunity zones, and Tulsa?
The Tulsa Massacre happened in 1923, and it was called the Black Wall Street. It was a prospering community filled with many businesses, many lawyers, doctors, and what happened is that in 1923, a white angry mob came in and basically burned the whole city down. And till this day, there has been no reparations or anything at all to kind of like diminish that wealth gap that was created by this incident.
I was just wondering if you had researched any potential solutions.
California has actually started implementing reparations, meaning that it can be done and that it's not something that's too far away from reality. Reparations is not only about giving money or giving things. Multiple reparation is also about reconstructing the way the tax system is built.
If there were to be reparations, do you think then that Black and brown people could participate successfully in capitalism?
There is no Black capitalism. It's capitalism in general. And I think that if equity does happen, if there are reparations, then the idea of capitalism, it can end up benefiting Black people.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you took away from this experience in terms of how you approach researching, making an argument, writing up an argument for a wider audience.
I think the main takeaway is that I had to really understand both arguments. If there's no like rebuttal, if like somebody doesn't like push back, I think that sometimes it's not as strong as it can be. Sometimes when you do listen to other people, maybe your opinion changes, maybe your argument becomes stronger. That aspect of it made me like really understand what it is that I want to say and what I don't want to say.
I was impressed by how much reading she had done. Obviously, Aaron had set up the course in a way, so that there was a lot of rich reading, and I can see how he supported her so that she wasn't out there researching sort of blindly.
So I suppose we need to evaluate. Do you want to start with viewpoint and thesis?
That band where it talks about argument, there was just this beautiful marrying of voice and argument where she spoke about the Warren legislation, the idea that there is space to write in a way to say what you want the way you want to say it, to lead your reader through an evolving argument is it's like a powerful technique, and I think it speaks to like that's her own organization.
That's right. She definitely did not play it safe here.
No.
In many cases, they viewed this as an impossible task before they did it.
The most important thing I think that I have to teach students is to have confidence. They need to know that they can read and think critically about what they read. They can take a risk and hypothesize something, and that they can talk about their academic thinking and their opinions with other people. She knew her paper. She could point to even specific quotes at times in her paper to make her point in response to our questions.
Her excitement about this topic made me excited and really had me start thinking about what I do and the things that I say about this topic. So I think that's really the most important part of this, is this like real conversation that comes out of this.
It's not just the academic and real world learning they get from this kind of process and discussion. It's also that social, emotional, who I am as a human being that students become empowered by.
I would like you to reflect a little bit about how you think this whole process went. What do you think really went well for you? And what do you think you would change if you ever had a chance to do this again?
I think the most challenging part of my presentation was finding a way to condense everything that I had to say in a short amount of time. I had to shorten 20 pages to 10, and that was already hard. I think that I did very well in explaining my evidence, my reasoning, and bringing it all together to my thesis.
You're really intrigued and driven by this inquiry. You passed this PBAT exam, and you did it with some immense distinction.
And this piece of writing, joins the conversation that we have in history.
Working with Keisha on this paper was a very long process. It was arduous, it was complicated.
It was really clear that she spent dozens and dozens, maybe over 100 hours in researching and really reading all those books. Like, it was really clear what an expert she was.
The strength of the social studies PBATs is that the student gets to feel what it's like to do history. This process that we use in the consortium is really like a training ground in being part of a democracy and engaging in our world.
When I was doing the writings of I realized that that's not the case. Black capitalism is not. I think that Fannie Lou's way of writing papers was a stepping stone for me. It's not about memorizing, or it's not about you being able to recite something from a text. I mean, I wrote my paper like a year ago. I did not look at my paper before this interview, and I think that there's still many things that I remember from it. People who go to like those schools that are very test heavy or like are all about testing and testing, they focus a lot more on there's one right solution. How do we get to that right solution? I think of the root of the problem, what caused the problem, how do we fix that? Coming into college, I had to be like, it's okay if you like sit down with a teacher and say you don't understand this and you don't get this, or you need this to be explained. You don't need to get stuff right away. I remember in Aaron's class talking to Aaron and saying, I don't understand this. How do I do this? I don't know how to shorten this. Can you help me? And I think it's something so simple as asking for help that can make the dramatic difference. The biggest thing that the PBATs have taught me was to critical think and analyze. True critical thinking is when you can actually, with everything that's happening in the world, look at that and say, I can form my own opinion about that, and this is my stand, and this is why.
All right, we're now ready to start the panel discussion, uh, which will be moderated by Adam Grumbach. From 1993 to 2014, Adam taught social studies at Urban Academy Laboratory High School, one of the consortium's founding member schools. He also attended law school during that time span. Adam served as Urban's principal/slash co-director from 2014 to 2020. And soon after that, he became the consortium's social studies program coordinator. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Kamala. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. Let me introduce our fabulous panelists in alphabetical order, and also let me remind them to turn their cameras and microphones on. Panelists, please wave your hand when I read your bio so people can match you to your description. First, the teacher of the class, Aaron Bruto. After teaching in schools not in the consortium, Aaron landed at the Fannie Lou Hamer Freedom High School in 2007. He's a social studies teacher who has developed courses on the civil rights movement, Caribbean history, and U.S. women's history. Next is one of the external evaluators, Felisa Brunschwig. Felisa joined the consortium as a social studies teacher at Middle College High School in 2003. She has developed courses in both world and U.S. history, always with a focus on helping students develop their own voice and ideas through writing. Unfortunately, Keisha had a prior commitment tonight, but luckily, we have a different student from the same class with us tonight, and you may recognize him from the video. Felix Salcedo graduated from Fannie Lou Hamer in 2024. Felix is a sophomore at NYU Gallatin, where he studies visual design with a focus on urban history, and he is currently studying abroad in Paris. Last but not least, our second external evaluator, Jamal Black. He's taught in both public and private schools for 28 years, the last 10 at Gotham Professional Arts Academy, a consortium school in Brooklyn. He teaches global studies with an emphasis on Africa, U.S. history, and art history. We're so grateful to all of you for taking the time to be with us tonight. So the panelists will begin by responding to questions that I've prepared. After that, they will respond to the questions you've put in the chat. So again, if you have a question as we go along, please just type it in the chat. Felix, I'd like to begin by asking you to talk about what in the video stands out to you in terms of your own experience with the PBATs, particularly as it concerns your writing of your papers. How is the experience Keisha had similar to or different from your own in terms of the projects you undertook and the process you went through in completing them?
Oh, immediately what stands out to me is how similar Keisha's experience was to mine. Personally, for my PBAT for Aaron's class, the social studies class, I wrote about the civil rights movement and basically the events leading up to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. My goal was to analyze what were the true intentions and the reasoning behind why the US government ended up supporting the civil rights movement and why the Civil Rights Act came to be. It actually wasn't originally one of the topics that Aaron gave us as a prompt, but throughout our back and forth talks and debates and discussions about what I should write about for this PBAT, I basically landed on that and I became really passionate and really interested about the topic. And it actually taught me a lot about how I write. Both Aaron and I simultaneously, we realized that I write best when I create an introduction first, whereas like other students would benefit from doing an outline or collecting their evidence separately. But I have to have my introduction and my thesis set out as the outline for my essay. And then everything just flowed perfectly. I mean, I was very stuck at first, but the second that I realized my method throughout the process of researching for this paper, everything flowed out perfectly.
Thank you, Felix. Felisa, this next question is for you. In the video, we saw how the ideas in Keisha's PBAT were developed throughout Aaron's course. Unlike the Regents exams, which are imposed from the outside and sort of the top down, the PBAT grows out of the classroom. Can you talk about how you and your class help students develop their PBAT projects and build the skills they need to complete their PBATs?
So our classes are structured to get students to talk to each other and debate what we're studying. And from those discussions and disagreements emerge the questions that students will write about. Sometimes a student will be fascinated by a particular topic, but they just want to write a kind of book report about it. And our job as teachers is to make sure that students are addressing a debatable question. As we saw in the video, Keisha didn't work with a question like, what is Black capitalism, or how does Black capitalism work? Rather, she wrestled with the debatable question, can Black capitalism work? And she and her classmate who couldn't be here today, Paula, they came to opposite conclusions, opposite responses to that question after significant and rigorous reading, research, and revision. So this means that we as teachers, we have to be experts on the content matter because we have to know which of the questions, which of the debates are rich enough to support a PBAT research project. So we need to make sure that students will have enough and diverse primary, secondary sources to wrestle with as they develop their argument.
Thank you, Felisa. Jamal, in this video, you remark at one point that Keisha, quote, really didn't play it safe. Can you expand on what you meant by that? And can you also talk about a bit about how and why you think students become invested in and claim ownership over their PBATs?
Well, I really think the magic is when they develop their own ideas in conversations with other students. I think that's where the questions really come from. When they begin, when I began teaching a PBAT class many, many years ago, I used to assign one question and then I would scaffold the writing for kids. But then I noticed that a bunch of the papers all looked exactly the same. And I realized, more importantly, that they weren't excited. And and that was because when they start debating and arguing with each other over these topics and developing their ideas and trying out ideas and arguments that sometimes fail, that they can again re-answer these things, and then the projects belong to them, and in many ways they are them. And you can see in the video, Acacia has done so much thinking and reading on the topic that she changed her own mind. And based on all the research she did, she's in the driver's seat. She's clearly excited about what she's done. And she says in the end, I'll remember it forever. And kids really do remember their PBATs. I don't think anyone remembers their Regents exams.
Thank you, Jamal. Aaron, it's clear from the video and this conversation that you work very closely with your students. Can you talk a little bit about how performance assessment and the PBAT process affects the way students and teachers relate to each other?
Yeah, okay. So I taught in a Regent school for 5 years before I came to Fannie Lou. And I pretty quickly knew I had to leave because there was just a lot of pressure to get kids to just really do better and better on the tests, which wasn't a great assessment to begin with. But then you really start to see the kids just kind of like as numbers, like this kid's going to get a high score, a 90, this kid's going to get a 65. And I don't want to value kids that way, right? Because the kid who's getting the 65 or the 70 might have a lot of interesting things to say, and the test kind of gets in the way of that. And I just didn't want to see kids as like obstacles or liabilities in any way. And so once I moved to Fannie Lou and really had to figure out how to teach and help kids do these PBATs, what I loved about it was the focus became on the kids themselves and their ideas, right? And I wanted to continue and to help kids to have that experience of a life of the mind. Um, and to do that, I think Jamal referenced this as well, right? Help them to discover who they are, what they want, what they're interested in, and then use my expertise in the field to help direct them to do that. But in order to do that, I have to know them as a whole person, The Regents does not encourage that. PBATs do. So I guess I would say that's really the big difference.
Thank you, Aaron. Felix, coming back to you. We've just seen an oral defense in the video. Can you tell us what the experience of doing your oral defense felt like for you?
So of course, it's very nerve-wracking at first. I would say with the oral defense, sorry, give me 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. So with the oral defense, it's a very nerve-wracking experience. Um, it tends to be very intense because you have to sum up so much into such a short amount of time. However, I knew that by the time that I had gotten to the point of the oral defense, I had so much knowledge on the subject that eventually it calmed me down because I knew what I was going to say. And eventually I kept doing so many PBATs and so many oral defenses that by the end of it, I became pretty like well versed and pretty comfortable in speaking and in public speaking. But of course, it's something that is a constant struggle. But PBATs help.
Thank you, Felix. Jamal and Felisa, I'd like to ask you each a question to explain the process a little more specifically. So Jamal, starting with you. In the video, we saw you in the role of an external evaluator. Can you explain why we use external evaluators and what you're trying to do in that role?
Well, the external evaluator's job is to provide a level of authenticity to the project. So the student has written the paper and it's already been approved by two other evaluators. And so the external evaluator's job is to read the paper very closely before the panel and then figure out what great questions to ask. And allow them to demonstrate how they know and how much they thought about the topic. I want questions that will let the student's voice come through. We've read their writing and now we want to hear from them. We want to get to ask how they came to their argument and if they change their mind, or we can even push their thinking even further. And by the way, it also acts as a check on AI or ChatGPT. It would be really hard to answer these questions if you had ChatGPT write it. So I think having to explain this project to strangers or at least other teachers who didn't help you with your paper makes the process more rigorous, since students can't assume that you know anything about their background. It makes it more respectable, and students come away proud of themselves, as they really should be.
Thank you, Jamal. Felisa, in the video, we saw you and Jamal filling out a rubric. Can you explain what the rubric is and how it's used?
So the rubric is the tool that we use to evaluate the paper across the consortium. It helps make sure that we're holding students to the same standards across all of our schools. And the rubric was developed by us, by groups of teachers, and revised by other groups of teachers. And in the process of working on the rubric, we read a lot of student work and talked about what we're looking for in a college level paper. And we sort of created a list of ingredients for what should be in a social studies paper. And then we differentiated the levels for a competent paper, a good paper, and for an outstanding paper. And so that's what the rubric looks like. It has the ingredients down the left, a clear thesis, viewpoint, or response to a debatable question, analysis, use of evidence, organization, student voice, etc. And the grid progresses across the page, explaining what each of those ingredients looks like at an outstanding level, a good level, and a competent paper. The final column on the right is called needs revision. And if even one evaluator determines that one of the ingredients is not at the competent level, the student has to revise the paper or represent the oral defense. And so we also support each other on this. Twice a year, we get together teachers from across schools in the consortium. We meet together. We look at 3 different papers from the different schools. We rate them independently. And then we talk for a while about why we each rated them the way we did. And that conversation is less about sort of the grade the student got and what the student couldn't do, and often more about the student's strengths and what we see the student working with or wrestling with. And so through that process, that's how we ensure, that's how we demonstrate that we're actually using the same standards across all our schools.
Thank you so much, Felisa. Aaron, I'm going to toss out a couple of arguments that people have made about consortium schools and the Regents exams, and I want to get your response. People have defended the Regents exams by saying that without them, you just can't hold kids to high standards. What's your response to that?
High standards. Yeah. So, yeah, I really respectfully just do not think that's true. I think the work that you saw from Keisha, I can tell you that Felix's work, the work from Paola, who other students who disagreed with Keisha. I mean, it's just not true because, right, the kids are holding one another accountable in that sense by pinning uh, their ideas against one another, right? And that's the PBAT process, right? And so we're trying to meet each student where they are, trying to get them together as a group, and trying to help them to use their own ideas to push themselves further, right? Their relationship with me, their relationship with each other, their relationship to the material. That's the purpose of all of that, right? But we also have like three levels on that rubric that Felisa was talking about, right? So so kids can pass at an outstanding, at a good, right, at a satisfactory, and we can often push kids further, right? I know that a kid is often at a satisfactory, but I won't grade the paper because I know that they can get to that outstanding, right? And I will leave it alone. I will refuse to accept it until they move forward because I can feel that I can get more from this kid. And then finally, I guess I would just say that like the Regents is like this one thing, right? That one bar that everyone's got to leap over, right? Um, but I think our approach works for a much wider array of kids, right? Maybe they're not great test takers, or maybe they are, but this is pushes them even further. Um, uh, right, but I just think that one multiple choice test that asks you what feel like very random questions that are not necessarily going to be applicable, that should not be the barrier or the bar for graduation. It should be having kids show us what they can do. And I guess just thinking about it, right? In the presentation we saw at the beginning, right? Consortium schools, on average, and I think that includes Fannie Lou as well, just do much better with students who have disabilities, multi-language learners, kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, right? I think that we don't see those kids in those categories, obviously, right? Each kid is way more than whatever label they might need. Um, but because we see each kid as an individual and because we are pushing them to be their best, right? To pursue the thing that's interesting to them and to be their best, we do really well with kids who may not do so well in a Regents, which just sort of is this very blunt tool.
Thank you. Well, so let me follow up. One question people often pose for consortium schools is if you don't have test scores, how do you hold teachers accountable for student learning? How do you know anybody's making progress? What do you say to that?
Um, So first of all, as you saw in the video, Jamal and Felisa read Keisha's work, and that's a very scary process, actually, right? Because I've worked hard, I've done all this work, but you want your colleagues to know that you've been working hard all year long with kids, right? And so it is my colleagues who are holding me accountable, and that's the PBAT process, right? So other teachers are looking at your work. There's a second reader, and they can send that work back and send it back to me, and I'd have to work on that, redo some of that work with the student, and that does happen sometimes, right? Lots of times teachers are inside my school, sometimes they're from outside of the school, and I want I have an ego. I want people to be impressed with my work. I want people to be impressed with what I've done with students. So that's one thing. And I think that one of the other things that we do is because in ninth grade, when the kids come in, you know that kids are going to have to get through this process in 11th or 12th grade. You begin working with them immediately in ninth grade, right? By having them do this process again. Here's a debatable question, write about your ideas, let's do some drafts, what do you think, debate with other students, right? So they're constantly in an iterative process practicing how to do that, right? And so I'm constantly working with other teachers in my school on, well, where are the kids in their progress on that? Where are they going? What are the issues that kids have, right? I worked very closely with Felix's teachers in the ninth and 10th grade, understanding what his strengths and challenges were. Um, and that's again another moment where I want the respect of my peers. They're holding me accountable, right? Felix and his family are holding me accountable in that way also because they're seeing the growth in the work over time because they know that's coming in the future. Um, and there's a lot more texture there for teachers and families and students to engage with to think about a kid's progress than just a number on a test. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, thank you for that very thorough defense of the consortium. Felix, coming back to you. At the end of the video, Keisha talks about how PBATs prepared her for college. How did you feel about your preparation?
Definitely 100%. I do feel like the PBATs prepared me for college. Specifically, the amount of reading and writing that I had to do, it was so intensive that it prepared me for the types of projects that included those types of 9 to 10 page essays that I did in college in my first year. Um, Specifically, also, I thought a lot about AI in my first year in college. I felt that I had the necessary critical thinking tools from my high school experience to not have to resort to AI as much as my peers at NYU had to, especially to start these essays and to follow through with the process. So in that way, I feel like it was really, really helpful.
Thank you. I know AI is on a lot of people's radar these days, and we're all wondering, how do we know that anything students do is coming from students? And Jamal talked a little bit about that also as one function of the external evaluator. Felisa, at the end of the video, you say the process that we use in the consortium is really like a training ground for being part of a democracy and engaging in the world. There's been a lot of emphasis on civics education recently. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about how the teaching and learning in consortium schools is preparing students for citizenship?
Well, what the social studies PBAT requires students to do is to make an argument about a debatable question and to continually test or deepen that argument as they debate with others, as they encounter new and more evidence. Students have to anticipate and understand the counter arguments that they'll face, and they have to be able to rebut them. In our classes, students have discussions with their peers where they're trying to convince each other of their arguments. And they learn that it's okay to disagree. They learn how to disagree. They learn how to make their argument more convincing. They learn that they can change their mind if they realize their argument isn't as strong as someone else's. And I think through all of that, they really understand how nuanced our world can be, that there are not simple answers to anything. And so the ability to engage in those arguments, to listen, to weigh evidence, to speak up, ask questions, push back against others, those are like the critical skills for citizens in a democracy.
Okay, I think that's a great note to wrap up this part of the webinar. Thank you all very much for your thoughtful answers. So now is when we're going to turn to the audience. I hope the video and this discussion has raised some questions for you. So please ask them if you haven't already. You can raise your hand or type them in the chat. And I'm going to turn to the chat now. Okay, so here's a question. It looks like it's, well, for really anybody here, but maybe the teachers. How many students are in each class in order to help them prepare to present their PBATs? How many teachers per class help to put the students' paper together? Does one of the teachers want to leap in on that one? Aaron, go ahead.
I think each school does a little bit differently. I can tell you that at Fannie Lou. Uh, I'm alone in the class, but usually with somewhere between 15 to 20 kids per class, and I have three classes. Um, and every semester that kids are in the 11th or 12th grade, they have the opportunity to try to go for their social studies PBAT. So I get it really spread out over 4 semesters. So not everybody tries to do it every semester. Um, so that's one piece of it, and they can also work with their advisor in advisory on it. So that's often another person who can read and offer some suggestions. And I'm more of the content specialist. And there's a lot of peer editing as well, and that really also goes a long way towards helping kids move forward through the process.
Thank you, Aaron. Jamal or Felisa or anybody want to add to that? Are things different in your schools?
Yeah, I think it's really a team effort. At my school, we have these special days. We call them reading days, where we actually dismiss most of the students, except for the students who are working on their PBATs. And then we invite them all together and we almost do a tag team. We just get all the teachers reading the papers, giving them their own advice, working hand in hand with the students so they really understand our comments. And it's really, really driven the inquiry for a lot of our students. But there's a lot of support from not only our own classrooms, but our co-teachers. Sometimes we're in IEP classes and we'll have a special ed coach teacher and then certainly most of my colleagues, certainly in my department, are always willing to help and just read the kids' papers. The kids will be excited about the papers and ask their favorite teacher to read the paper too.
Okay, we have another question here. Does the PBAT or the life of the mind change your experience of learning as a teacher? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'll just
Felisa.
say quickly, yeah, that it has to. You're engaging with, even if a student from even if two students are engaging with the same question, they're engaging with it differently. And so you're thinking and working with each student. And when you're thinking about what makes a debatable question, you're finding new sources. So that it's the best part because I am always learning more, thinking more deeply about the content as well as about how I teach. But absolutely, it's an amazing experience as a teacher versus a place where I started out where I was sort of expected to do the same thing the same way every year.
Thank you.
Can I
I
add
also,
something to
Aaron,
that?
go ahead.
I was gonna.
Sure, I'll go. Sure. I just also just want to say, just like really specifically to give a concrete example, where like kids will ask you, and I'm sure that Jamal and Felice have had this same experience. Kids will ask you a really interesting question. You've designed this semester or year-long course, and you're like, you know what? I actually had not thought of that question. That's a really good one. And then you and the student get to have this really wonderful experience going off together and trying to find an answer. And in my experience, usually you find like a partial answer, and you're like, well, that's the way this stuff goes, right? We found something. Let's work with this. Let's see what we think about that idea. But that you just get to explore the world in a way with this young person who's very enthusiastic about it, right? They are directing the learning. Um, of me, right? But then it enriches my classroom. Here's this other thing that other students can take that semester or the next year or something like that, right? So Felix's question has entered the repertoire for me, right? Of questions and sources that I'm going to use with students in the future.
Thank you, Aaron. Felix, you wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say, like, I remember having moments like that with Erin, but even going back to the oral defense, as a student, I had moments throughout my oral defense and my PBATs where I felt like I was educating external evaluators and external educators on different topics that they were not teaching. So it's also important to recognize that students are also teaching teachers at the same time.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. One of the things I do a lot these days is I sit on panels because I'm no longer in the classroom or in a school, particular school. So I try to sit on as many PBAT panels as I can as an external evaluator. And it's really a rewarding experience for me. And I like to think for the students there. And what I always say is like when an oral defense goes well, you see the student kind of growing as an intellectual person. Like you see them just answering questions that they didn't even know they knew they could answer before. And it's just this very rewarding situation for everybody in the room, I think. All right, let me turn to another question from the chat. This is kind of a nuts and bolts one. How do you know your child is getting what they need? When do students begin their PBATs? And how, as a parent, do I know that my child is working on it? I think that probably varies from school to school as well, but I'll say I think in almost all of our schools, PBATs begin in the junior year in 11th grade. And your child will usually be in a class, not in all schools, but in most of our schools, your child will be in a class that is designated as a PBAT class. So when you get their midterm reports or when you go to parent teacher night, you should be informed at that point that a student is working on that this is a PBAT class and that my child, your child will be working on a PBAT in that class. Okay, next question. What are the social studies courses intended for PBAT presentations? Are they the same in every school or are they different? Felisa?
Sure, they're different. We have, as teachers, we have a lot of autonomy as to what courses we choose to teach. Obviously, we do that thoughtfully. We do it in collaboration with teachers in our schools, sometimes in collaboration with teachers across schools, but um, students typically have a choice for what class they might want to take the PBAT in, like Aaron was speaking about before. So it's different. It's different in every school.
Okay. Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, so at Fannie Lou, we have courses on, I teach a course on U.S. foreign policy in the Caribbean. I have a colleague who teaches a class on peace building, right? Like just looking at different examples around the world of people trying to make peace and what does that look like? So kids will write a PBAT on that. As Felix said, I also teach a class on the civil rights movement, on U.S. women's history. I teach a debate class that sometimes PBATs grow out of. So lots of, so it's also about the like teachers' intellectual interests and shaping what they want to teach, what they feel competent and what they know a lot about, and then what they're excited to work on with kids.
Jamal?
Yeah,
Gotham?
I think that's the most exciting part about teaching at a PBET school is that all of the teachers in the content areas really follow their own passions. And so they really bring that like expertise and excitement to these classes. And that's usually where some of these PBAT classes sort of spawn from. And usually the PBET schools, at least at our schools, are more refined classes where the teachers taught the class for several years and got some great debate topics and some really rigorous texts that they found. I mean, that's what really makes a great PBAT class.
Thank you. The next question is, what happens if a student doesn't pass? Do they get opportunities to modify their work? And if so, how many?
We
Felisa?
just say in my school, this happens. It's real. And I think that the teacher's response is much more of a jumping in to help response than in a sort of shunning or making the student feel bad. When a student doesn't pass a PBAT, we see it as yet another teaching opportunity. And so whether that means a student meets one-on-one with another teacher, whether it means the student meets with different teachers, again, the sort of the solution to the not passing depends on the student and why they didn't pass and what kind of support they might need.
Thank you, Aaron. I saw you shaking your head vigorously. I assume that means you agree.
Yeah. It's just it's this, it's another moment to understand where the kid is. It's a formative assessment, right? It's not the end. Okay, let's figure out what other help you need. How else can we help you to be a little bit more independent in this moment? And then, a day, a week, a month, let's move on and we'll try again.
Okay,
And I'll just add one more thing,
sure.
which is that because students present a PBAT in each discipline area, they often learn how to get stronger in preparing and what a PBAT is and how to defend it from one PBAT to the next. So if a student presents their social studies PBAT first and doesn't pass that social studies PBAT, by the time they take on their math PBAT or their English PBAT, they much more understand what the whole process entails. And so it really is a learning experience across time. I think we heard Felix sort of speaking to that earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I'll point out that the band on the rubric that deals with students who don't pass, the band itself is called needs revision. So the expectation is not that you failed, done, move on to something else. The expectation is that you're going to get a chance to do it again. And that can be both for the paper and also for the oral defense. If you froze up, you're going to have a chance to come back and do it again, which again, I think makes it very different and from the Regents exams. And students often talk about just sort of there's sort of good anxiety and bad anxiety. And bad anxiety is like when you're just terrified of something and there's nothing you can do about it. And good anxiety is where you can motivate yourself by being a little bit nervous, what Felix talks about earlier. You can be nervous, but you can also know you're going to get through something and you're sort of being supported by your community. And the teachers are there to help you. They're not there to make it a gotcha. They're there to help you show what you can do. All right, I'm talking too much, but let me, okay, one more question. Are students introduced to PBAT examples in a way to help them understand the nuance of the format before they begin their own work on the topic? I think anybody can answer that.
I think that's like a really great question because I think it really encapsulates what we do and why uh, we have dedicated classes to these PBATs where we really could sort of uh, um, cultivate these discussions between the kids. We ask the right questions. We try to get the best sources for the kids to see, all the different perspectives and different ways to argue these debatable questions, and that's really the key ingredient.
Kamala, did you want to jump in?
I did. So my kids went to one of the six schools that is a 6 through 12 school. So they were actually started in sixth grade and went through to 12th grade. And one of the things that was great about that is that the younger students, they don't start doing like the full-on PBATs, but they start getting used to presenting, and they also go to older students' PBAT presentations, and they also serve as like research subjects, for example. So, like a science class might be doing some research and like administering a survey or something to giving them a little test or something, and so they witnessed that as students in the school, and so they know when they get to be that age, they're going to be doing something similar. They'll have to find subjects to test. They'll have to use the correct protocol for human subjects of an experiment or investigation. So there's I think that happens also in high schools, but in the 6 through 12 schools, they can really have a lot of preparation. Um, and the last thing I'll say is that one of my children is very quiet and soft spoken, and you would think that 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 she would have a hard time with uh, that sort of thing, but she didn't.
Excellent. Aaron?
Yeah, I just also want to say to that point, yes, I absolutely agree with Kamal and Jamal. Uh, both the experience of the schools over many years helps kids to prepare and introduces them to what's required for this very important assignment, and often you have a dedicated course. But also our courses 9 through 10, and then 11, always emphasize the same skills required of the PBAT. So kids are constantly, 4 times a semester in their humanities courses are getting the experience of, being confronted with some debatable topics, developing their own questions, their own viewpoints, gathering evidence, writing about it, right, and very often presenting about it. So it is this iterative process where they are constantly practicing those skills, so that when it comes time for the PBAT, they are, yes, it's a larger project, but they're prepared. They understand some of what's expected of them. It's still a challenge, but they understand what's required by them.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for those different responses. I'm going to go actually to a question that was put in the registration form that I think may be on the minds of multiple families, so I just want to get it out there. The question was, what accommodations are available for students with disabilities to ensure that they are able to succeed in their PBATs? And it's a great question, and I'm going to respond to it just because I've been in a lot of schools and I've seen the accommodations across many schools. And also I'm in regular conversation with our special education coach who works in several of our schools to support special ed teachers. And she also led a working group of special ed teachers to develop a comprehensive set of accommodations for students in writing and defending their PBATs. You should take a look at that if you're curious. The link should be in the chat. The PBAT process is already individualized, I would just point out. I think that should be clear from the video and what you've heard tonight. And it's much more amenable to support through accommodations and teacher intervention than a multiple choice test. Most of our students write their many of our students write their PBATs in ICT classrooms or with the support of a SETS teacher. I'm not going to go into specific accommodations since they're complicated and varied, beyond saying that they are written into students' IEPs and correlated with their specific disabilities, whether they're based more in disabilities involving, like I say, executive function or processing or emotions and anxiety. The IEP should specify what accommodations they should have for their PBATs. And that can include, graphic organizers, it can include assistive technology, it can include changing the order of the presentation and the paper, questions in advance, those sorts of things. We have accommodations. The document is really very thoughtful and exhaustive. And I think, again, I want to refer back to the numbers that Kamala showed you at the beginning of this presentation, which just demonstrate how successful our schools are at working with students with disabilities and helping them succeed and graduate. That seems to be all the questions. I want to say a huge thank you for all the questions. And I want to say an even huger thank you to our panelists for their incredibly thoughtful insights tonight. I hope this presentation has made clearer how the PBAT process works in our schools and how it prepares students for the future. And with that, I will hand the mic back to Kamala to tell us what is coming next and how to learn more. Thank you so much, everyone.
So thank you so much for being here tonight. As a reminder, tonight's session was the second of a series. The 2 remaining sessions will grapple with growing standardization in education and provide researcher and alumni perspectives on postgraduate outcomes for consortium students. The next session is a week from today, Monday, March 30th. We will share the perspectives of a researcher, teacher, and principal on how standardized testing and commercial curriculum interfere with student learning and educator professionalism, and what you can do about this, whether you are affiliated with a consortium school or not. The sign-up link for that is in the chat if you haven't already registered or want to tell others about this series. And finally, you can find us online in these spaces if you want to explore the consortium further. We also invite you to join our mailing list. The sign-up link is in the chat. And with that, good night, and thank you so much for coming.